So today, we're going to dig into this really powerful idea from Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy. And we're going to focus on that very first stage of any big goal, aspiration. It's that moment you decide, I'm going to build this or create that, or just become something more. And believe it or not, that's exactly where our biggest obstacle loves to show up. So let me just ask you, right off the bat, what do you think is the biggest thing holding you back? Is it a lack of money, not enough time, just plain bad luck? Well, the book we're exploring today argues that it's actually something much, much closer to home. It's something internal. And here it is. This is the villain of our story, ego. Now, Holiday defines it really simply, as an unhealthy belief in our own importance. It's that little voice in your head that whispers, you're better than you are, that you deserve all the recognition before you've even earned it. It's the opponent inside you, and it is most dangerous when we're just starting out. So how exactly does ego sabotage us right at the beginning? Well, the very first trap is something we are all told to do. Talk about our goals. But, and this is a big but, it turns out that might just be the worst thing you could possibly do. Okay, so here's the conflict. The common myth, right, is to tell everybody, build all this hype, create accountability for yourself. But the truth, according to Holiday, is that talking and doing, they actually fight for the same resources. Talk becomes this cheap substitute for the actual hard work. And here's the psychology behind why this is so tricky. When you talk about the book you're going to write or the company you're going to build, your brain gets this little hit of satisfaction, these endorphins. It's like you get the social pat on the back without ever writing a single page or a single line of code. That talk literally robs you of the fuel you need for the real action. All right, let's move on to the next sacred cow that this book just totally challenges. We're told constantly, follow your passion. But what if that passion is actually just another form of ego? What if it's blinding us to the reality of the work that's required? You see, unchecked passion has a few major problems. Holiday points out that it's often, breathless and frantic. It's all energy, but with zero direction. It can feel amazing, sure, but it's a really poor substitute for good old-fashioned discipline when the work gets tough. And even worse, that passion can mask a weakness, making us feel super confident when we should probably be learning. And ultimately, it just becomes detached from reality, a fantasy that ignores all the practical steps you need to take. So the alternative he offers is purpose. And just look at the difference here. Purpose isn't about you, it's about pursuing something outside of yourself. It's not some flash in the pan, it builds on experience slowly over time. And it's not fueled by raw emotion, it's based on discipline and perseverance. But most importantly, it shifts the whole question from what do I want to the much, much more powerful question, how can I be useful? And this leads us right into another one of ego's greatest traps when we're in that early aspire stage. The temptation to focus on being someone rather than actually doing the work. I mean, just look at this comparison. Ego wants to be impressive. It wants the title, the recognition, the fancy business card. It's all about pretending. But real progress comes from doing impressive work. It's about focusing on the task right in front of you, earning your stripes, and actually being useful. You see, impressing people is a world away from actually being impressive. I absolutely love this quote from Frederick Douglass. It just perfectly captures this idea. The work itself is what shapes you. You don't become a great writer by calling yourself a writer. You become one by sitting down and writing, day after day after day. The action is what defines you, not the label you give yourself. So how do we stay focused on the doing? The book lays out a really clear path. First, you've got to evaluate your own ability honestly, and I mean really honestly, without any ego getting in the way. Second, constantly ask yourself that critical question, am I actually being useful right now? And third, focus on the facts, what you've actually done, not the dreams of what you want to be. All these different ideas, avoiding the talk, choosing purpose over passion, focusing on doing instead of being, they all lead to one unifying, really powerful mindset. This is the ultimate antidote to ego when we're starting out. And it's this simple. Always be a student. It doesn't matter how much you know or how much you think you know. Approach your work and your life from a place of humility and a real desire to learn. So why is this so incredibly effective? Well, because being a student fundamentally puts your ego in its place. It puts your ambition in the hands of your teachers or in the craft itself. It forces you to admit that you don't have all the answers, and that fosters genuine humility. It makes you reject the ego's desire for shortcuts and opens you up to what truly matters: continuous, lifelong learning. And we'll end on this powerful quote from the Stoic philosopher Epictetus. "It is impossible to learn that which one thinks one already knows." I mean, wow. It's the perfect summary, right? The second you let your ego convince you that you're done learning, you have guaranteed that you will stop growing. So the final question to leave you with is this: what do you think you already know that might be stopping you from truly beginning? You know, we live in a world that's constantly screaming for our attention, for glory. But what if I told you that the real key to lasting success is to do the complete opposite? So let's just get right to it with the one question that drives pretty much every ambitious person out there. How do you actually achieve greatness? I mean, is there a secret, a hack? We're all looking for that magic bullet. Well, the answer we're going to unpack today is probably not what you're expecting. It's this: start by being the least important person in the room. Yeah, I know it sounds totally backward, but just stick with me. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. See, most of us get derailed before we even get properly started, and it's usually because we fall into something you could call the glory trap. When you're just starting out on any path, you've got to face three pretty blunt realities. First, you're not as good or important as you think you are. Ouch. Second, your attitude probably needs a serious reality check. And third, a whole lot of what you learned in school, it's already out of date or just plain wrong. It's a tough pill to swallow for sure, but you have to get past this to actually grow. So you need to ask yourself this question, and be really honest. Is your focus on doing the work, or is it secretly about chasing your own glory? And that, right there, that's the trap. The desire to look successful so often gets in the way of being successful. So, if chasing glory is the trap, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to the core strategy we're talking about today, the canvas strategy. The canvas strategy is actually beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of trying to build your own stage from scratch, find someone who's already got a great one and help make their stage even bigger and better. You find successful people or a great organization, and you make it your mission to clear the path for them. It's about serving, not about shining. So how do you actually do this? It's pretty much a four-step process. First, find the right people. Then, look for what's getting in their way and remove those obstacles. Now, here's the crucial part. Step 3. You do it for their benefit, not yours. The reward for you comes later in step 4, when the results you help create speak for themselves and raise you up naturally. This really gets to the heart of it. Be lesser, do more. You know, greatness isn't born from some brilliant idea that just pops into your head. It's forged in the unglamorous, thankless grunt work that nobody else really wants to do. Now, trying to apply this strategy is going to lead to some internal conflict. And that brings us to the really hard part, the inner battle, mastering your ego. Come on, we've all heard this voice in our heads, right? You're doing the hard work, you're not getting any credit, and your ego just starts screaming, "I'm better than this, I deserve more." That feeling, right there, is the single biggest threat to your progress. And here's the brutally effective response to that voice. It doesn't matter. That feeling of injustice, it's irrelevant. The only productive thing you can do is take it, quietly brush it off, and channel all that frustration back into the work. Just work harder. You have to think about it strategically. You can't change the rules of the game until you've actually mastered it. The newcomers, they always have to endure the system as it is. So your real power, your most critical skill at this stage, isn't fighting back. It's restraint. Patience is your weapon. And this quote just nails the danger of getting lost in your own head. You know, stewing, complaining, building up this whole narrative where you're the victim. That's a world of illusions. The only reality that matters is the work you're putting in. You have to stop performing for that imaginary audience in your head. And this mindset, it's not just for beginners. If you want to have success that actually lasts, you have to make this a lifelong pursuit. You have to always, always stay a student. I love this quote from the Basketball Hall of Famer Ed Macaulay. It's such a wake-up call. Complacency is the enemy. The moment you think you've made it and you stop practicing, someone else somewhere is getting better. And when you finally meet them, they will win. So let's look at this crucial shift in mindset. We're always told to fake it till you make it. But honestly, That's a dangerous illusion, because sooner or later, you're going to be tested and found out. The reality, the better way, is to work until you can't be found out, until your skills and your results are so solid that they're just undeniable. So what does this student mindset look like in practice? Well, first, just quit thinking you're special. Second, keep your identity small. Don't wrap your entire ego up in your job title. Third, make it about the work itself, not some grand, flashy vision. And finally, start small. Prove yourself on a small scale, and then you earn the right to take on bigger missions. And this all leads us to the final and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle. All this work, this restraint, this humility, what's it all for? You have to define your why. After you strip away the ego and the need for praise and the hunger for glory, what's left? What's left is self-awareness. And knowing what you truly value, what you actually like. That's the beginning of real wisdom. That becomes your compass. And this is the fundamental question you have to ask yourself. What is truly important to you? Not to society, not to your parents, but to you. Why are you chasing the things you're chasing? Getting crystal clear on this is everything. Because if you don't have a clear why, you fall into the trap of just wanting more. Think about money. If you don't define how much is enough for the life you truly want, the default answer will always be more. And you'll spend your whole life on this unsatisfying treadmill, going nowhere. So let's be absolutely clear. True, sustainable success isn't some magical destiny you were born for. It's not about being a genius or getting discovered. It's rooted in the humble, powerful combination of work, creativity, persistence, and a little bit of luck. That's the real path. The only question is, are you willing to walk it?
Whenever we're chasing success, we're always looking for the obstacles out there, right? The competition, the market, the challenges. But what if the biggest battle we'll ever face isn't out there at all? What if it's in here? Today, we're diving deep into the ego and how it can be either our greatest ally or our absolute worst enemy.
Seriously, just take a second and think about that. It is so easy to blame the world when things don't go our way. But the hard truth, the most difficult knockdown, drag-out fights are almost always the ones we have with ourselves. The real opponent is so often that person staring right back at us in the mirror.
Okay, so first things first, let's get something straight. We are not talking about healthy confidence here. Not at all. We're talking about a totally destructive force, this overblown sense of self-importance that some have called the disease of me. It's that sneaky part of us that whispers promises of greatness, but, almost always leads to a spectacular crash and burn.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Belief that's built on stuff you've actually done, on real accomplishments, yeah, that's confidence. But belief that's just based on nothing, that's ego. And that right there is exactly why we see so many people have these incredible, meteoric rises only to fall just as fast. They're brought down by the weight of their own unearned self-importance.
So, how can you even spot this disease of me, either in yourself or maybe in someone else? Well, it turns out there are 3 really clear warning signs. Think of them as giant, flashing red flags, telling you that your ego is starting to grab the steering wheel.
So number 1 is entitlement. It's that little voice in your head that whispers, you deserve this. It's yours. You've already earned it, even when the work isn't done. This creates these totally ridiculous expectations. It makes us think we're way more important than we actually are.
And the second one, a desperate, white-knuckled need for control. Look, this isn't leadership. It's puppeteering. It's that impulse to micromanage every single tiny detail because you are convinced that your way is the only right way. And an attitude like that, it just completely suffocates any kind of teamwork or new ideas.
And that brings us to warning sign number 3, paranoia. It's what psychologists sometimes call a narcissistic injury, where you take completely random, indifferent events and make them all about you. A project gets delayed, and your immediate thought is, they're trying to sabotage me. That's just your ego, making you the main character in a drama that doesn't even exist.
So what's the antidote to all this? Well, check out General Eisenhower's philosophy. It was so simple. Find the absolute best person for the job and then get out of their way. Let them do it. He didn't need to control everything because his confidence was real. He could delegate. And that is the polar opposite of an ego that needs to micromanage everything.
All right, so if entitlement, control, and paranoia are the disease, then what's the cure? It really just boils down to 2 things:
Humble, consistent, hard work. And finding a purpose that is so much bigger than your own personal glory. Just think about the story of Belisarius for a second. This guy was a hero. I mean, one of the greatest generals in history, saved his people again and again. And his reward? He got no lasting credit, and his end was just tragic. The lesson here is pretty brutal. If you're doing the work just for the applause, you are setting yourself up for a world of disappointment. The work itself has to be enough.
I love this quote. This old piece of sports wisdom just captures that idea perfectly, doesn't it? When you pour all your effort into the success of the team, or the mission, or the cause, something bigger than you, your own individual contribution just naturally gets noticed. Your ego demands the spotlight, but real, lasting impact, that comes from just doing your part.
Okay, this next idea is a real game changer. Life is going to throw times at you where you're just waiting, or frustrated, stuck. We can call this dead time. But here's the most important part. What you do at that time is 100% your choice.
Take a look at this. Dead time is when you're just passive. You're sitting around waiting for things to happen to you. It feels like a prison, right? But alive time, that's a conscious decision to use that exact same period actively, to learn something, to practice, to prepare, to grow. You can't always control your situation, but you can always control whether that time is a prison or a classroom.
And all of this leads us to one final absolutely crucial idea. How are you measuring your success? Is it by what other people think, or is it by your own internal standards? This, my friends, is the difference between an external scorecard and an inner one.
The difference is actually really simple. The ego is always asking, what can I get away with? But that inner scorecard? It asks a totally different question. Did I do my absolute best? It's all about holding yourself to your own high standards, especially when nobody else is looking.
So what happens when you do fail? Because you will. The ego panics. It grips even harder. It starts looking for someone, anyone, to blame. But the truly productive response is the exact opposite. Release your grip, get humble, and just go back to the fundamentals, the basic principles that brought you success in the first place.
So what does all this boil down to? What can you actually do? Here are 3 simple, actionable rules. First, live with purpose, not just passion, because purpose is what keeps you going when the fiery passion fades. Second, always be a student. You are never too good or too smart to learn something new. And third, and this is a big one, talk less and do more. Let your work speak for itself.
This quote just sums it all up, doesn't it? True, lasting greatness isn't born from some big ego or a sense of entitlement. It is forged in the fire of humble, often boring, unglamorous, hard work. It's about being okay with being the least important person in the room until your results prove otherwise.
So, I'm going to leave you with this one question. Imagine you did the work, your absolute best work. You poured everything into it, and nobody noticed. No praise, no reward, nothing. Was it still enough? Your answer to that question reveals everything about whether you're living by their scorecard or by your own.